So, okay, so week 12 of BIM 1040. So just so you're all aware, through the work stoppage, I wasn't able to communicate directly, but I was posting announcements onto here. And what I did do for the benefit of you all was I continued to actually record the virtual sessions, the live sessions from week 7 through to week 11. So because now they're compressing, obviously the rest of the semester, 5 weeks compressed into 3 or whatever it is. From my perspective, I would just say go when you have the chances, go and watch the videos of weeks 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, and then we can follow up with dialogue and closing up the quizzes and the assignments. So what I'm looking to do, and I think I outlined it here, is we'll ignore the hybrid portion. At your leisure, follow the weeks and just read them. What we're going to talk about today isn't dependent on any of the previous 5 weeks. It kind of continues on from BIM execution plan back, actually, believe it or not, coincidentally, in week 6. So we're going to talk about BIM use workflows and just enhancing an execution plan today. But I'd recommend watch the videos if you haven't already of 7, 8, and 9. There's a quiz from week 9 that I have open, and I'm going to keep it open until end of next week, so the 30th, because I know we're not trying. They said no assessments this week or anything like that, but it's similar in the quiz like the previous ones. 10 short questions based on the content of the previous couple of weeks. Then watch 10 and 11. Again, there's the week 11 quiz. Again, 10 short questions. So at your leisure, do that. And if you guys think the 30th is, it's pushing it, we can extend the deadline for those quizzes to a week beyond, if that makes sense to you. I have then also the assignment from week 8, which is creating a technical solution. So in the week 8 video and the week 9 video, I actually walked through a bit of the assignment as well. And I know there was a couple of email exchanges on that as well. But I'd recommend just proceed with that. I put its deadline as well into end of next week. We can extend that beyond if needed. Now, my hope though is that if with the rest of this month, if we could just bring closure on those aspects. And again, as I said, watch them at your leisure. It's kind of compressed those weeks. So instead of the 2-hour classes, it's really just the 1-hour presentation with a bit of front end and back end dialogue. Then it'll really let us to use a couple weeks in December to do a review so I can answer any questions next week relative to the previous weeks, and then focus on that final presentation and build that into December 14th or even December 22nd, or even hold it off into the new year, whichever makes sense. So I guess any thought, I'm assuming you've all seen these postings here, but any immediate thoughts on this as a path forward, and what your perspectives on whether it's fair or something workable? Because for me, I'm open to set it to whatever makes sense for all of you. So any comments?
It sounds right. Yeah, I think due to the circumstances, this is the best option.
Okay. And I did cancel. The revised CSI, I had an assignment after this class, actually a week 12 assignment. So I thought, so I actually removed that. So instead of the 4 assignments being worth 25% each of assignments, it's 3 assignments, 33% each. So that alleviated one perspective. And what I really want to do is press us towards the final presentation, because that's kind of bringing it all together. And for me, that's more exciting than having another assignment in there. How about the other? Amit, Ben, Lydia, what do you all think?
Yeah, I'm just gonna ask about the final presentation, how it looks like, or where's the details of that, or not yet?
Yes, so that's it. Good. So I need, if you guys are in front of Blackboard right now. So what I've done, very quickly on the final, we'll do that right now. So assuming we get through everything, this week 8 one is a technical solution. Again, similar to the collaboration, I gave some particulars, and I'm asking for a technical. The final presentation, it's a group assignment. So what I've done is and I'll show the groups in a moment. So the idea is similar to what would happen in the real world as a BIM coordinator. You're given one of the major projects. So you're basically given one of these projects from week 5. So project 1, 2, and 3, group 1, 2, and 3. And it gives you the particulars of splitting the groups. You have the previous information from assignment 5, week 5 and week 8. Create some organizations, documentation of the EIR. So some of this information is fictitious. Document an assessment form of how to deal with a couple of different organizations. So you've got a firm that doesn't know what BIM is, a firm with really bad IT, and a firm with no resources. You have multiple parties. You have be mindful of the project delivery, and we have the defined deliverable requirements. And I'm asking you to make a BIM execution plan. So just take one of the templates, work as a team. So teams of 2 with one team of 3, document this, and a quick presentation. And the idea, there's really no tricks to it, in my opinion. No. You guys can tell me otherwise, but from my end, it's similar to what would happen in the real world. So I'm a project manager, and there's this BIM thing, tell me what I got to do. As a BIM coordinator, you'll go and you'll say, well, these are the requirements, here's the execution plan, and here's a quick presentation. You sit in front of a meeting. In any typical meeting, you might be given 15 minutes max. Maybe you get an hour if you're lucky to tell the project manager what it's all about. And that's my idea here. And when it's a large project, and why I want to force the teamwork is because that's what you'll be forced into. And yeah, it's, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But I want to just test that here. So take the project, take the information, do your best to put a plan together, and again, a quick plan, a couple of slides on what you're doing, and then we just have a presentation in the last class. So that's the mission. That's what I'm looking to achieve here. Now, for you to view what I see on my screen, this is what I was struggling with to verify. So if you go to the top here where it says groups, you should see this link, and then you should see the group you're a part of. So I'm seeing everything, and I can't validate what you see. But if I select group number 1, I've got Vitor and Ravi in that. So you guys, because you're both in this group, you should be able to see this group. You should be able to see the presentation, and then get into the presentation. Those who are in group 2, you would be, let's just press this quickly. I've got Amit and Suraj. I apologize for saying your name wrong. So yeah, you guys should see that, and again, be able to get into the group. And then group 3 would be Lydia and the 2 Bens. And again, so Lydia, you should be able to see this, hit see group 3, and get to access the presentation. And if you guys aren't seeing that, I got to get the Blackboard helping figure out why you can't see it.
I think I saw that, yeah.
Okay, awesome. And what I said is I wanted to open everything because I figured now with the compressed nature, I want everything to be on the table for you all to see. So in the weekly learning materials, we're here in week 12 right now. We're going to go through the presentation of it. next week, initially I had it scheduled where you would do an initial presentation and then a final presentation, but I decided to pull that together into one. So next week we'll really just review everything. We'll talk about the final presentation. We'll talk about any, ooh, somebody's got some background noise. We'll talk about any of the previous weeks. So if you're able to watch the videos, let me know if you have any questions or comments, and we'll go through that. And we'll really use next week as just like, I have no new presentation material after this week, but we'll use it to revisit and discuss whatever you guys want to discuss. And then from the quiz perspective, you guys have already done 2 and 6. 9 and 11 are open, and I'm going to leave them open for the rest of the month. The final exam, I won't open until, this is the 8th, but I probably won't open it until after week 14, the original week 14, and I'll leave it open until the end of the term, right? So at your leisure, whenever you want. The final exam is just a bunch of multiple choice questions, tapping on all the stuff we talked about throughout the entire term. But I don't want to give any pressure on when you have to do it, so you guys have your full freedom to schedule it whenever you want to do it. Cool?
Okay, a last question, please.
Yeah.
For the final exam, it's the end of the semester. You mean after New Year? I mean after till January. January.
Yeah.
January 12th.
Whatever that date is. So when I open it, so right now it's not set as visible. Okay, so none of you guys can't see it. But when I make it available, what have I done here? Okay, so I've got to, I'll adjust it. So basically what I'll do is, if our last week is the 15th, that's the last scheduled class, I'll probably make it pop open on the 18th, and I'll let it stay available. When is the last day? The 12th or the 19th of January?
Maybe 12, yeah, I'm not sure.
Well, okay, so I'll just leave it open till the 12th, and you guys have full freedom. Whenever. It's all online. It's all multiple choice. So yeah, the point is you got to do it though. But it's I'll bombard you to actually do it, obviously. But so that's what we'll do. So it's available. It'll be available after December 18th for 4 weeks really. So.
Remember this
Sorry.
The presentation is going to be in class?
Yeah, well, it'll be on this forum here, is what I'm envisioning. So virtual, what I'll do is I can make you guys presenters, and you'll be able to just walk through whatever you have to show for the presentation.
Okay.
And why I like that, and again, it's just because of the experiences I've had. It's very rare that you're always in the same office to the people you have to present this to. So you could see the nature of even how I'm portraying BIM collaboration and everything. You're presenting to people across the globe and other firms, etc., using tools just like what I'm using to present to you all here today. So the idea is, and you'll see this. You set up a Skype meeting, you set up a GoTo, share your screen, convey your message, and hopefully it resonates from a BIM perspective. So that's pretty much exactly what I want to do here. Is so force you into a team, force you guys to collaborate a little bit, develop something, and present it back to me. And yeah, no tricks on. I hope you could see I'm not about tricks. I just want to put that to the test, because the first thing, I just hired 2 BIM coordinators at IBI Group. And that's the first thing, is I just send them off to dialogue with discipline leads, dialogue with PMs, present an idea, and see how they do. And they don't quit on me, so it works pretty good so far. So, cool? Okay.
Yes.
So, okay, so if there's no other questions, what I'll do is I'll do the presentation material, and then we'll close with any questions. So when we left, way back when, we just talked about BIM uses, okay? So we did, again, just very quickly, we talked about overview of BIM, client requirements, the EIR, client setting the premise. We looked at the BIM execution plan, very critical with the Bible, what we do, heavily influenced by the software we have to use, heavily influenced by how we have to share. And then we talked about the various possible BIM uses. And it's funny because now we're at BIM use workflow diagrams. So right from week 6, what I'm going to talk about today kind of follows through to that. When you look at the virtual classes, online, I talked about the deliverable requirements in week 7. So basically, no matter what we want to do with BIM, oftentimes we're told, actually, Amit, did you want to just press mute just because of the background noise? Sorry, thank you. Deliverable requirement, we may have all the aspirations in the world. A client might say, deliver me MicroStation. And then, this is fresh on my mind because we have 2 instances where it's a Revit project that has to go to MicroStation. And it just forces a workflow. It forces different ways of thinking. You do it, may not be fun. So then in week 8, we talked about building a technical solution. And that's what the current open assignment is about. So it's basically taking everything previously talked about, saying, great, now you have all this stuff. Now you got to do something with it and portray it. Then we diverted week 9 and 10. I would call that the driest part of this course, but it's not very exciting. But it was to give the perspective to you all on, and I explained, I prefaced this in the recording of why sometimes when you say we're going to do BIM, you get all the resistance, the fear of liability, the fear of negligence. So that, we talked about that in week 9. Week 10, a little more of that going into project delivery. So the legal and the contracts and how projects are formulated and what are those barriers when we all have the right aspirations to do what we want to do, yet we have resistance based on those particulars. Last week 11, I basically just went through some case studies. I said, great, we've talked about a whole bunch of stuff for 10 weeks. Let me show you some examples. Sometimes it's just, it was basically all my IBI examples that we have. And sometimes it's redundant. I divided it into buildings and infrastructure, and I showed you a plant example. So very similar to the week 5, the 3 project examples in the assignment. So I kind of showed you examples in all 3 of those realms. You can see that it's real. We do this stuff. We have actual examples of them. And now we're at BIM use workflows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the presentation and just basically, before I get to it, when we talked about the Penn State BIM execution plan, I posted this back, I think this was in the first assignment, and you were comparing the 2. The Penn State one has these process maps, which the UK one does not. So it's one of the biggest differences that we identified between the 2. Process maps, they're good, and some people think they're a pain in the butt, but they do serve a bit of a purpose, and we're going to talk about that today. But this example here, once I'm done the presentation, I'm going to go to this process map, and we're just going to look at it a bit. And, it is a very technical process map getting from A to B, start to finish. And we'll talk about why these are here, the benefit they give you. Some people despise these, but, it's good. And the main gist of it is, you can have a process map for absolutely everything. And it basically is, if I'm going to do BIM, how? That's the whole question. How are you going to do it? Based on everything we talked about in the previous weeks, if you say we're going to make drawings, the simplest of things, how are you going to do it? In this presentation here, I'm going to expose you to a couple of things that spark the need for process maps, or that can just help you to understand, why we need to be clear on who's doing what. And just from my professional experience very recently, I do get a lot of, Grant, what do you actually want us to do? And I sit back and I struggle because I'm thinking, okay, well, just, do your work. Just, and sometimes I fall into a little bit of naivety, thinking, why are they asking me these questions? Just do it. But then I realized that no, they want a lot of clarity from the BIM coordinators. I'll hear, well, what do you want us to model? How do you want us to model it? Who's supposed to do what? Who owns that model? How do I coordinate with the external? So even when you did the collaboration diagrams, actually that's a good example. In the week 5 assignment, you guys had those 3 examples of how to collaborate. Well, I asked you just to diagram, what system you're doing what. So some of you had things like ProjectWise and A360, collaboration for Revit, etc., local servers. Well, once we did that, the next step would be, great, now how? You told me there's going to be a Revit model in one system, and there's going to be another model in another system. Well, now what? And those are the questions that come up a lot. Sorry, my home phone is ringing there. Okay, so let's go through these here. So the first one is I want to expose component classification. And this is an important piece because you'll hear this a lot, especially coming from the contractor's end of things. So, in the BIM world, on the design side, we think of this. The building comes together, it's a whole. You have multiple disciplines, and I think I've showed this image before. The multiple disciplines are really coming from a bunch of models put together. But oftentimes, it's great. So that gives you your coordination, your visualization, unless you make your drawings, but I want to know about the pieces. Tell me about the bits and boxes of the model. What makes it up? What's the component? What's it all about? So for that, there are various classification systems in the world. And it's a code for like components. It's probably the best way to describe it. So if you think of your experience with Revit, doors, walls, slabs, roofs, those are all like components, right? I could have multiple types of doors. But what if I wanted to couple doors and windows together? Well, those are all openings. What if I wanted to couple all my furniture? Multiple components under one classification. So as it says, it facilitates the ability to query information from major to minor, okay? Helps to support fabrication, procurement, cost estimating, schedule simulation. So, and asset management, very critical piece. Problem is there's too many systems across the globe. Use of the systems is so incredibly inconsistent, it's mind-boggling in the globe today. And there's not a good understanding of these systems themselves. So very quickly, Uniclass is a system that's out there, roughly 15 tables, an example of the codes there. So people who are grossly familiar with Uniclass will know a G3221 is an external door, and they speak that language. Now, part of the complexity here is Uniclass just upgraded itself. So there's actually 2 Uniclass systems, 1 and 2. And they're used sporadically, a lot in the UK and some other jurisdictions. So even within the realm of Uniclass itself, somebody who was used to a G3221 now would have to go and call it, and I don't even know these offhand, but whatever, it would be, one of those doors over there, a PR 30 something. So already now there's complication in the world of Uniclass. An example there, I could be a cost estimator using Timberline as my system, and I could have the Uniclass code built in, and I could be querying the model, wanting to pull the information on the model. If I see door, funnel it to my Uniclass code and allow me to cost estimate. But now there's 2 Uniclass. There's then master format, and this is very North American. Anything that we design and construct in the world would fall in North America, in the physical world, would fall under one of these master format specifications. So it's built by the Canadian Construction Specification Institute, the CSI, and it's US and Canada very common. So this I grew up with as an architect, right? So you say door, I say Division 8. You say roof, I say Division 7, thermal and moisture. Brick walls, Division 4, masonry. It's got 50 divisions, used to be 16, expanded it to 50. Earthwork, Division 31. Furniture, scattered for a couple, Division 12, Division 11. So a lot of people know this. This allows us to link our models to specs, link our models to local procurement within North America. So it's a very common system here. Again, what's the biggest problem? Let's say I have a massive and awesome content library, and we're doing a project in Australia. Oh, they couldn't care less about master format. So then I've got a problem there. So a lot of our projects are global, and a lot of major projects use global entities. When I engage our office in India, if I'm harnessing some forms of data like this, I've got to be clear. Uniformat is another North American one, and it is also sponsored by CSI. So for me, it's mind-boggling from that perspective, thinking now I've got two systems sponsored by the same organizations for the same geography. Why? But it's there. And this one I know a little less of, but it's, again, its focus is more so on building systems as opposed to all of the components of construction. So that was its more focused regime. So then the ISO standards came out and said, my goodness, can't we just have one? We'll call it Omni class. And the idea with Omni class is, as the word Omni suggests, it'll be the one for everything. We'll take the best of all the pieces, the best of Uniclass, Uniformat, Master Format, and some of the others, which I'm not talking about here, pull them all together into one. Sounded good. The problem is most jurisdictions say, whatever, we'll use the one we're familiar with. So, problem in the world, multiple systems, all trying to do the same thing. From a BIM coordinator's perspective, the answer really should be, who cares? Okay? Just understand the concept of a classification system. And I think that's the important thing. And the reason for that is it builds into, remember this week, the umbrella of a workflow. It builds in because if you need to ensure information in your model is being accommodated through these classification systems, you just need to make sure that whether it's, maybe it's a workflow around content creation, which we have a lot in IBI. I need a new component. How do I create it? Who creates it? Who validates it? Who enters the classification information? And how does it get put into the model? Not a complicated workflow, but so important, right? The other one could be if I'm feeding cost estimations. Let's say we're using that bin use, and we'll see, actually there is a use map about that later on to look at. But if we're doing that, you're going to model. At some point, you're going to grab a static snapshot. Somebody has to validate the data. The data has to be validated to the classification system. It has to be fed through an export process into the cost estimating system where the estimate happens and then validated back. Again, it's all about workflow. Something starts, something ends. Every single piece, actually, honestly, everything we've talked about, either live in the first 6 weeks or after you watch those classes, weeks 7 to 11, everything in there, there's a workflow that someone can build around how it gets done. So classification fused now with BIM. Everything that's in the model is something. And that's the beauty of our authoring tools. I think in week 1, I said, when I started doing BIM, again, so pre-Revit, I was using Bentley first. It was very easy to be unintelligent. Now, if you opened up Revit and you wanted to do unintelligent things, it's pretty hard to do. So you got to sit there and understand what goes in the model, what it is, why it is, how it's connected. And that's a beautiful thing. A lot of those classification systems are automatically built into the tools today. So what I'm showing you here is Bentley's EcoSim. It does it honestly way better than Revit. You open up EcoSim, it doesn't matter if you're using Uniclass, OmniClass, Uniformat, Master Format, and these other ones. I don't even know what NetSpec is, NTE. Like one of them, you can see NTE Puertas Carpinat. It's like a carpenter's thing for so one of the Spanish or South American countries. Awesome. it's all built in. So all of the out-of-the-box components that they deliver and their data definition assigns the classification, whether it's the root or something deep, to every single component. And that is so powerful. Then when you add components as a BIM coordinator, so if I added another door, all of these base definitions are assigned to it. Now, if my door wasn't glazed, I can go and change the NAT spec, but the uni class would apply. The uni format, if I made an exterior instead of an interior, I'd be able to change that. So that's where the knowledge has to come in the workflow, saying, if I know this stuff is there and I'm expanding my component base, are we choosing to exclude, or are we going to augment and make it right? And when I used to work at CH2 Mill, we were heavy Bentley, and we would make sure all of this was filled out, because you never know when it'll come in handy. Structural, again, same concept. And the power of this is, from the Bentley perspective, they've actually gone ahead and built all of the systems. And when they update their software, they add more systems, or they make sure the systems are current and up to date in case there's any augmentation. So from a BIM coordinator's perspective, you've just got to select, you can search it. I'm making an exterior wall, let me find it. I'm making a chair, what's the entry? And you can do that. And if you're not sure, because again, as a BIM coordinator, you may not be an architect, you may not be a structural engineer. You ask the question and you find it. Revit has them built in as well, but it only has, I believe it's Uniformat and OmniClass. So for our UK office, we had to add Uniclass to build it in. But again, similar in concept. It's pick tables, you read them, you select, and you assign it to your components. So again, it's all about workflow. It's all about ensuring that what you're selecting is available, accurate, correct, and feeding into that potential downstream use for the data. And why I'm showing you this is, the complexity really around harnessing data. So that's what I was going to say. The complexity around that doesn't have to be as profound as it could be. And I think back, let me just go back here for a second. I think back to 15 years ago, I'd model something and I would be building the information from scratch. Now it's, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? What are we BIMing? Why are we BIMing it? And where's it going? And if you know it's going somewhere, just be cognizant of where it might be going. When we harness data, most of our workflows couple around what the component is, what we're going to model, what data we're going to harness, and then how we identify this thing. So the models will tell us that the components will be built into the systems. It'll take up some type of space, and the software has a bunch of information that will let us harness and apply that data. And then part of our workflows will be, we're going to do something with the data. So when I showed the asset management system, we used the unique identifier to bind it to an external asset management system. Very critical. If you're not doing that, very irrelevant. And that's what you have to understand. That BIM execution plan, defining why we're doing it, and asset management is a great piece. It's awesome. If you're going to do asset management, what is the workflow to achieve it? And that was the first thing we did at IBI Group when we were trying to build our system. When we portray BIM, I've asked, what's the benefit of this then? And I keep showing the parametric nature of our information. Very simple. You place the doors. This is obvious. It's available in 3D as opposed to having to draw it in 2D. But the parametric nature of the geometry plus the definition of that data. And this is where I used to do a lot of my work as architect. The power of having my door data just there at my fingertips was immense. Yet I had to configure, I had to understand, I had to build that workflow. And there was a handshake, if you will, between me as architect and the BIM coordinator who were driving the backbone of these tools. Without that handshake, without that ability to share this information and harness it, wouldn't be able to get my schedule, and I wouldn't be able to do the things I wanted to do with my data. Push button data, my components appear. My information appears, my scheduling is occurring. It's all critical. Am I visualizing? Am I harnessing the data? Am I making drawings? Am I making schedules? Am I doing more? Very, very critical question. Now, with a workflow and specifications, this is where now a little more will come into play. So if you recall that wheel of BIM, design authoring, design review, and visualization. Three very simple, practical, everyday BIM uses. If somebody's doing BIM, they're most likely making drawings, reviewing designs, and visualizing. Specifications are a huge one, and I already alluded to that a bit with the classification systems. There's so much we can do to connect and tie our models with specifications. Now, if you haven't worked in the design environment, specs, and I think I talked about it a bit in the week 9 legal, but specs are the paper documents. Basically, it's all the words and the particulars about the components we're designing. Very simple example, and I'll stick with doors because doors are the life of an architect. You have a door, right? You design it in the model. It could be very simple. It could be 1 meter wide, 2.2 meters high. Very simple geometry, 50 millimeters thick, cuts a hole in the wall. Pretty much all I need to model. From a spec perspective, by identifying it as a door, and maybe it's a hollow metal door, the spec tells me all the particulars about the material, the makeup of the door, the hardware of the door. So does it have a knob? Does it have a lever? Does it have 2 hinges? Does it have 3 hinges? If it's fire rated, does it have to have a ULC classification? Does it have a door closer? Does it have door stops? All of these components, you don't model this stuff. In the Revit model, in the EcoSim model, it's just the door. All this other stuff comes through the spec. But how do I know I need to spec something? The biggest challenge and what BIM is supposed to solve. So think of everything you do in a Revit model. Think of all the stuff. Every single item you place needs a spec. So just imagine that. I'm just looking around the room where I'm sitting in. The fireplace, the gypsum wallboard, the metal studs, the wood studs, the finished wood baseboards, the table, the chair, the kitchen, the fridge, whatever's around you, all of those pieces need a spec. As an architect, the worst part of design is going through the drawings prepared by somebody else, finding all the stuff, making sure I've spec'd it all. And then it gets even more complicated. So imagine the exterior wall. So the wall is made up of gypsum wallboard, maybe there's concrete block, maybe there's brick on the outside, there could be damp proofing, there could be an air barrier, there could be sealant, there could be flashing, there could be a parapet, oh my God, on the exterior wall, there could be maybe 15, 20 specs that apply to that. In Revit could tell me your exterior wall is wall assembly, whatever, here's all the components of it, here's your spec. That's what I'm talking about here with linkages to specs. So the classification system is a first step. If we're placing the components here in North America with the master format spec, that's awesome. I can query the model and the model can tell me, hey, Brent, you better make sure you have these 15, 20 spec sections. Simple. I look, I see, I'll get them. Nice and easy. When any component is placed, as I said earlier, they all come. And notice the difference here, like your door or windows, a Division 8, another Division 8, Division 12. I might have Division 22, depending on what I'm placing structurally. Then there's tools like eSpecs. I don't know if any of you have played with that. It's pretty awesome. It takes an online spec repository and it says scan your Revit model, sort of literally click a button, and we're going to identify all the specs, pull the master specs, prepare an initial cut of them, analyze your model, remove what we can or what can be done, and give you something to start with, all based on my model components. Now imagine the workflow for that. If we were actually doing this, you know, there's a lot depending on a very good model. There's a lot depending on the BIM coordinator coordinating with the architect and discipline modelers and maybe the structural engineers. Oftentimes the structural model may have a component that relies on an architectural spec and vice versa. It's crazy, but it's so fun, let me tell you. And this is what it starts to do. It might start to remove and delete items that it believes don't apply based on the components that were placed in the model. So a bit of a powerful tool. Similar in the, just showing you that it's not just the specs in the Revit world. This is SpecWave and Bentley's EcoSim. Same concept. It scans the model, edits an online database of specs. Basically, it divides your spec into intelligent components. So to say, if I see this in the model, therefore I need this in the spec. And as an architect, I can tell you this is the most mundane aspect of being an architect. It's going through these spec sections, reading through. It's horrible. That's especially when you're given a Word document and you have to say, make sure it represents what's in your model. The other thing it does is it automatically updates whatever standards are required in my spec as well. So an example there is if I have a masonry spec, which handles brick and concrete block, but my building only has concrete block, it'll remove brick, keep concrete block. And if I say the concrete block has a smooth finish, it'll remove all the other finishes. It'll remove all of the industry standards about brick, leave only the ones about concrete block. It'll do a lot of awesome stuff, time saving, efficient making, creation of efficiency, all around stuff that I really hate doing. It's just awful stuff. Oh, BIM Drive, and yeah, this was a good one too. Just again, 3 examples, all the same thing. You could see it identifies items, portrays it to you, pulls the information from the model. So you know, the user sets the information, and you know, part of the issue is that I could get something wrong if the user does the wrong thing. Stressing a good set of content. Content is very important when we're doing more than just creating drawings. And you know, just dwell on that for a moment. You can have a really, really data bad model, an unintelligent model, that if I cut a planar section, it'll look fine. If that's all I'm doing, it'll look fine. And if I'm new to BIM, that might be all the efficiency I'm thinking, I'm expecting. And I'll say, great, BIM is awesome. But then I go and read some, I can press a button and get quantities and I can get a spec. Let me try it. And I've got a bad data model. I'm going to get bad quantities, bad specs, bad, etc. So that's why we stress, be cognizant of this. So when as a BIM coordinator, if you're asked to make a door and you have the opportunity, well, you know it's going to be a fire-rated door. Fire-rated doors are inside. And I can select the uniformat classification for interior doors. Why not? Why not select the Division 8 master format spec for interior doors? Just do it when you're making the content. Ask the question, as opposed to leaving things blank and closing the door on the possibilities, or even worse, not checking, and then you put a door into your content, but it's data is saying that it's a pipe or it's something else, and you just don't know because you never checked it. So just be cognizant of that. And sorry, the other reason is, you know, if you're hired into a firm, newish to BIM, and you're just making content, everything's awesome for the first year, then you start trying to do additional things, you'll basically have a foundation that's not supportive of advanced BIM applications. The other thing, the concept of specs driving BIM, and this comes heavily in the plant world, but has potential in the building world. And I'll talk a bit about this in case you haven't seen this. So a spec-driven workflow means a spec, basically written information, controls what you can model, okay? And it's funny that this is how I was first exposed to BIM. So my first BIM projects were all plant projects. So when I got to pure buildings, I thought, wow, this is pretty easy going. So this is a spec, and this is actually something I've worked on. So AWWA is a standard American, but North American process piping spec. So this would be given to me. Here, Brent, and I look at it. So what is this? I'm an architect. This makes no sense. But then it actually did make sense. So, not to dwell on this because this, this was years. But if you're exposed to this, basically it's saying for what this is showing, flanged ductile iron. Basically, it's a piece of pipe that has a flange at the end to connect to another piece of pipe. So you usually bolt it or weld it pipe to pipe to pipe. This is saying I have various sizes, so I can go from 4-inch up to 64-inch, and the spec is controlling everything. So it's saying for 4-inch, my outside diameter radius is 4.8-inch. It's going to have an end condition of a flange, and away you go. And what I'm able to do is say, on a project, let's say you're working on so it's one of those plant projects. I think that's project number 3 from week 5. Let's say the client says to you, no pipes less than 12-inch for flange ductile iron. What does that mean to you? Well, you tell your piping modelers, don't do anything less than 12 inches. But what if they do? So in something like this, all I'd have to do is deselect 10 and 4 and 6 and 8. And all of a sudden, they're not available anymore in the modeling application. Very powerful. The spec drives. In the Revit world, there are piping tables. Revit used to be much weaker on the piping side, but now there's a lot more control. But in Revit, it's very non-industry standard in that you can put whatever you want into it. You can make pipes that are 2.6565, whatever. So here you're restricted by the industry standard, and then you can further restrict what can be done. So here's an image just showing the valves. So these are all of the valves that are available. So the sizes for the valves. If a client says, so I don't know if you're familiar with any of these, but a ball valve is probably the most typical. If you have a house and you turn the crank to turn off your water, the ball valves are the easy ones to turn, whereas a gate valve is your typical exterior tap. It turns and it closes a gate, shut the water type thing. For me, I still don't know what a swing check valve, some of these I don't know, I've never seen before. But again, it's the client. Sometimes a client will say, yep, I only want check, butterfly, and ball. So you got to get rid of the rest, for example. And what that does is, in some of the piping applications, if I go to select one of these items, the modeling tool tells me you can't have it. So again, what's the workflow? The workflow to validate, if I know that there are these restrictions with doing spec-driven workflows, the critical part, or spec-driven modeling, who's going to tell us as BIM coordinators, this is what we can model. This is the spec. This is what you're allowed. Then you feed it into the model, you validate, and you develop your model. And it'll be like, just like with clash detection. Somebody will say, hold on a minute, no, I need this valve. Well, as a BIM coordinator, I'm not going to just turn it on because I don't know if they're right or wrong. So then what's the workflow? There's a request. I go to the piping designer. We may have to go to the client for validation. Then we update the spec. Then it's available in the model. And that would be a workflow. And oftentimes these BIM use workflows are not about technical. So I could teach you. I could sit you guys, all of you down in an hour or two. I can show you. Here's how you get to this. It's in Access. You open this table, check a button, yay, you updated the spec. Not very complicated. It would be more about showing you where to find it. And then I can show you, again, how to then load it into the project. So the actual technical workflow of doing this, it's easy. But the actual BIM use workflows is about, yeah, you'll do the technical thing, but how do you communicate, validate, identify, verify, quality check, and implement? That's what those BIM use workflows are about. And then identifying who's delivering what to whom and validating. So here, I'm showing, I think I showed this in the previous week, the intelligent schematics. What we put in those specs are available in these schematics. So for plant projects like this, and I show you this because BIM is not just about those buildings, it's about the information. And I'm spending a lot of time right now on the architecture side, bringing in intelligent building workflows. So building automation, artificial intelligence based on analyzing our use of our buildings, and it often comes down to schematics like this. How do buildings function? What's driving a building? This is a plant-based schematic, but where's your building-based schematic? And once you have that, how are you controlling it? So it's coming more and more, and we're discovering these things as we go forward. But this is a general workflow, and this is a very simple one that we use to describe plant-based modeling. I've got a spec narrative, and a narrative basically says, if I have a copper pipe, so look around wherever you live, copper pipes, plumbing for your toilets, whatever it is, they can get very small, but they cannot get very big. So copper piping versus concrete piping is my favorite. The narrative will say, reinforced concrete pipes for your toilets, it's never going to happen. Doesn't make sense. You don't make half-inch concrete pipes. Same breath of those large plants projects where you have 4-foot, 5-foot diameter piping, so 2-meter diameter pipes. Copper doesn't do that. Concrete does it really well. So the narrative tells you what you can do. Then the line class spec, that's those access tables. Defines what goes in your model, make your schematic, make your 3D model, and then you make your outputs, your bill of materials, 2D, 3D, isometric, doesn't matter, and then you get your final specs. So this is a huge spec-driven workflow. And if you're put on a project, and I use this as an example, not to scare you as BIM coordinators, but depending on where you get your jobs after, this was my first job. And I'm telling you, I came out of as an intern architect with interest in BIM. Brent, here, do this. I didn't know what a narrative and a line, I didn't know what any of this stuff was. And it was crazy, but it was fun, I promise you. So isometrics, even if you're just working on traditional buildings, oftentimes I've seen mechanical engineers say, give me a duct isometric or a plumbing isometric. And right now with Revit 2018, I've seen some real exciting new tools about tying together your piping models to make them assemblies to then generate isometrics using the Plant 3D online engine. So some really cool new stuff coming out of Autodesk's world where you can generate these types of things out of Revit through their Plant tools. So that's good stuff. And again, this is all just reading all of that piping or those spec-based data to allow us to deliver our components into the industrial world. So yeah, we'll leave it at that. So the eye of BIM. A lot of our workflows are about the eye of BIM. There's another way I've used, and this diagram is actually quite old. This was used to show how do we make things work, or what are we actually doing? So if somebody says to you, great, we're talking about information, right? It's all about the eye of BIM. We can do this. Well, what do you want me to do? So what do we want people to do? It all starts with a library. There's a component library of stuff. Oftentimes people try to grab it online from vendors without quality checking the material. So we always got to be careful. The stuff we're grabbing, will it bog down our model? Does it show the right stuff? And I like this example. Do I need all those rivets and all that stuff? Probably not. This is a very generic pump, I think it is, if I remember. And mechanical equipment is my favorite because You want to show enough to know what it is. You don't want to get so complex. I had a coworker once who used to model the buttons and the flip switches and a whole bunch of insane stuff. We don't need that stuff. But with mechanical equipment, you often need a connector. So if I attach a pipe to here or a duct to here, will it size it properly? That's the most critical thing with mechanical components. You model it, and modeling in various platforms. If you are lucky enough to have everything in Revit, everything in ArchiCAD, everything in Bentley, good for you. I have rarely been that lucky in my entire career. All good. Nothing wrong with having multiple applications. You do a review. Review models are very typical. Your Navisworks, your Navigator, your Solibri. Pull all the stuff together and look at it. You look at it, you clash detect it, you query it, you look for soft clashes. We talked about that, I think it was in week 5. So hard clashes, right? The things that are clashing, and then you identify should they or shouldn't they be clashing. And my favorite, beam sits on column, that's a good clash. Beam going through duct, that's a very bad clash. And you identify it, you mitigate it. Column in front of door. It's not a clash, but it's a very bad soft clash. We don't want that. You have schematics, and this happens a lot in the plants world, but in buildings, electrical and building mechanical often have clashes that, often have schematics, they have clashes too, but they have schematics that most often, they just say separate. If you have a Revit model, you've got these 2D schematics that are floating out on the side. There's an effort to bring all of that together because these schematics is really the potential, the backbone, the intelligence side of your building. In the plant world, they're very much in the forefront while we have those spec-driven workflow processes. But these schematics are the guts of your building often. Want to make sure they're right and consistent with your model. You might have a review with your client. That's a very old computer graphic, so I apologize for that. Then there's a database. You transfer data from everywhere. All the data comes together, whether it's data about clashes, clash resolution, what's in the schematics, what's in the actual modeling applications, stuff straight from your library. And then you do stuff with the data, and you go mobile, and you go wherever you need to go. This is one of my favorite workflows because it's a diagram that makes people get it, than what I found, compared to the workflow diagrams I'm about to show you. We'll get there. So when specs are driving your BIM, it sounds good, right? But there's complications. You need good specs. In the plant world, you need to know what you're doing. In the building world, we don't really have spec-driven workflows yet. But imagine that, I keep dreaming that I'd love Revit to be smarter, for example. So why can't Revit tell me, hey, Brent, this is an interior concrete wall. You gave it a fire rating. You're about to put a door with too much glass. Don't use that door, right? Base it on building code, base it on proper information. So, Autodesk is looking at that, having Revit be more adaptive and let Revit be a designer with me as opposed to an unintelligent application where I'm pressing buttons. And I say unintelligent with a grain of salt because all BIM applications are intelligent, but they don't collaborate with you. You need to tell the software what to do. Why can't the software help me? And we're going to get to that world where I pop open Revit and I sit down and I say, okay, today I'm designing a whatever. And it'll say, okay, Mr. Architect, let me design with you. One day, I promise. Master specs. Now, this is an IBI spec, obviously, but inside IBI, a lot of the industry firms will use things like ARCOM or the NMS, the National Master Specs, where a lot of these items are out of the box, built in defined specification documents that you can then link to your models. So, but that's what I talked about, the opening the door for future automated routines to link data streams from the BIM. That's my brain. That's where I see the future of everything. And I can't remember which week I talked about the Internet of Things, and we all live in a world of connectivity. So imagine everything we put in a model today is connected to information about it tomorrow, whether it's through an asset management system or through how you, the users, are actually using the components. We're so not there, but that's where we're going to get to. But in order to get there, BIM coordinators need to have their head around, all right, if we're doing this stuff, I may not know how to do it, but I got to build a workflow and define what we're going to do. And remember, I think I've said this every week we've spoken, we're orchestrators, we're not the ones that do everything. So if I said to you as a project manager, we are going to make an interactive space. I want the data about all the stuff in the space to talk and interact with the users. You're not going to do that, but you're going to build a workflow that says, all right, here's how I think we're going to approach this stuff, and then we'll validate it. So that's kind of where we are. And then that kind of leads into this. So after, I'm going to zoom in on the BIM execution with template ones. But these are ones we've taken the Penn State and adapted them for IBI Group. So I just wanted to show what we do in the real world before I put you back with just the industry template. So what we did was we took the Penn State and we said, okay, let's put this into how we interact. And I apologize, it is kind of tiny, but we will zoom in. But the idea here is, we've got modes of delivery, okay? And then this was 2 weeks ago. We talked about modes of project delivery. You could be design, bid, build. You could be design, build. You could be in a P3, integrated project delivery. But we're always going through very similar iterations of you author your schematic design development, contract documents. Once you author, you do a couple things. So here it's 3D coordination, virtual model, some engineering analysis. We go through a workflow, we author again, we do various uses, we author again, various uses. And at each stage at the bottom, so there's processes we follow, where we do this iterative, we do this throughout schematic, we do these throughout design development, and then we deliver. There's a program brief, there's your schematic design, a bunch of drawings, a review model or an analysis model. Same thing for development, same thing for construction documents. Then it goes on and on. And the idea here is what Penn State said is level 1 is an overall high-level process. So you identify what are the potential uses and when are you going to use them throughout that timeline. And this timeline is the critical thing for me, because oftentimes they say, you may hear, we're going to do quantities. Excellent. We start the project. Can I have my quantities? But, well, we just started modeling, so no, there's no quantities yet. And then you have this dialogue, but I want my quantities. I need it. So it's making sure, from a BIM coordinator, you say to an estimator, well, you're not getting quantities at 10% design. You're going to have a big contingency of what you're guessing. At 60% design, you'll have better quantities. And it's common sense, but common sense sometimes disappears when we're applying technology, and there's the assumption that, well, now that I, quote, have Revit will do all these magical things for me, and we're completely void of project delivery, when we're designing, what's been designed, and all of those fundamentals of actual design projects that bleed into construction that still apply regardless of the fact that they are BIM. Then we get into level 2. And level 2 focuses on specific BIM uses. So this is existing conditions modeling. Very simple, right? We said we're going to collect the information, be fed some survey data. So that's what the orange for us is info exchange, the green is the process. So when we're collecting information, if we're not getting survey data, no, we don't have anything. And then we're going to do something. We're going to compile the information, and then we're going to model existing conditions and have an output. This is our existing conditions model. Now, this is a template for us, because at this, inside the process here, from our perspective, we may be engaging a scan to BIM outfit. We may be just modeling. So we may just be modeling by going to site, measuring, modeling. Or there may be an info exchange with a scan to BIM entity. So somebody may be going, doing a 3D scan, generating a model, delivering it to us, and then we're just compiling. I prefer that one because it puts the onus on somebody else. So I'm not going to go through all of these, so I do want to zoom in on, but there's site analysis, programming. So the Penn State one has each of these. Design authoring is one I'm going to dwell on when we zoom in on the Penn State. But again, it's the same concept. Schematic design, design development, contract document, 30, 60, 90. And design authoring, this is the fundamental. Okay, info exchange, we need an LOD matrix. So what does that mean? Level of development defines the model element authors of the major components. So to put it very simply, and a lot of people get bogged down on LOD. But one of the biggest things it does for us. You're structural, I'm architectural. Who's modeling the slab, you or me? All right? Structural, I hope. Structural might say, you know what? No, you do it architectural. Well, let's have that dialogue. My thing is, I don't want two slabs. I want one slab. So let's decide. Same with walls. Concrete walls often get discussed. Masonry walls often get discussed as well. Who's modeling these things? Make those decisions. That's all documented in the matrix, which is part of the execution plan. And here it's create the models, right? Seems pretty obvious. We create the models. You better be linking those models together, and we make drawings. And then somebody validates, are the models good? If not, keep going. If yes, proceed to 60%. If they're good, proceed to 90. If they're good, you're done the process, right? And that's what a process map is. And when you look at this, you think, kind of makes sense, kind of non-technical at all, right? But the beauty on a project, and this is interesting, when I look at this as our template, notice create civil model. That's often completely overlooked. And think back to the week 5 assignment on collaboration, right? I was very deliberately explicit to say, here's your building models, and you're going to use this software, and here's your civil. Buildings don't float. I often see this missing, and people will say, oh, why do I have to do this? I don't care, this is very simple. And I say, well, there's a couple things, right? LOD matrix, identify required models, civil. What are we doing? And then they stop and they say, oh, great, we're going to have civil 3D, inroads, we're going to try to jam it into Revit. What are we going to do? Who's doing it? Oh, it's another entity. Oh no, we got to share with an external. And all of a sudden, a whole dialogue opens up. And then other is fun too. They go, what do you mean other? Well, are there other people? You go talk to the project manager. Oh yeah, we have a specialty lighting consultant. Oh yeah, this was on a project and this came up. Oh yeah, what do they do? Oh, they just use AutoCAD. Oh yeah, how? Oh, AutoCAD 3D. Oh, okay, cool. And how? And we started dialoguing. Yep, we need a Revit export. When you export from Revit, we can't have A, B, and C. You can only have these. But watch your walls, ceilings, and floors, because oftentimes the export gives us something we can't use, so it needs a bit of a cleanup. And once we had that dialogue, my jaw dropped. I said, oh my God, the process to export to this one consultant was mind-boggling. So, something could blow up from something very simple. Design review is a very common one. And, here it's, you could have a visualization, compile info for a client review, constructability review, or other, it doesn't matter, right? And that's the whole point is, what are we doing? Like the input is your design model. So the design model comes into the process, and now let's do stuff. So this in itself, this one line is probably the biggest thing of the BIM coordinator. So you know where all the models are. What are you going to pull them into? This process does not talk about software. Okay? I need a model for client review. Does the client have a preference? Is there an EIR? What software are we using? Do they want to use just Adobe? Are they okay with Navisworks Freedom? Are they a Bentley shop? Do they want Solibri? Are they the UK government that want an IFC file? Whole bunch of questions on just client review. So you got to define how you're going to do that. But the workflow is pretty simple. Grab all the models, pull them all together, and deliver. What am I doing in order to achieve that? I'm going to just skip over the rest of these because you can have a look at these. Cost estimating, again, very common one, right? You got all the stuff coming in within your model. So these are the inputs: cost reports and analysis. The estimator has to drive this, not the BIM person. We will do the BIM takeoff potentially. Everything else. So we're going to export the model, etc., deliver back to the estimator. So these workflows also help to identify who are the important parties to give and receive information. Cost estimation is critical. If you as BIM coordinator, is a critical concept that if you are asked to be a cost estimator, you step back and say, oh, definitely not. I am not a professional cost estimator. As an architect, I want to step back and say, I hate doing cost estimating. But as a BIM coordinator, my goodness, no, all right? 4D modeling, so managing the schedule simulation. Again, the critical pieces are the ins and outs and what are the processes through those workflows. I'm going to zoom in on a couple of these when I close the presentation. So that's why I'm just jumping through these. The analyses ones are interesting as well. Building analysis, this is interesting as well. So the process from the BIM coordinator, have somebody manage the performance analysis. Hopefully it's not you. Integrate the maintenance information from the facility manager. Then you analyze the model, make sure it works, and then you continue preparing the schedule, adjust, perform, and validate the data. But you're not a building systems expert. So a lot of times when we're doing building systems analysis, our BIM coordinator, usually coupled with somebody from the mechanical discipline, are working hand in hand to make this happen. And these inputs and outputs, oftentimes as a BIM coordinator, it's, here's the energy model. How do I tie it into Revit? So you're not doing anything in Revit, you're not doing anything in the energy model, but you might be helping them to glue the information together. And that's where the workflow comes in, or the technical aspects. And you may not know how to do it. You may be calling Autodesk, you may be calling a reseller, you may be becoming very friendly with YouTube and Google. And that's all okay. That's the way to make this stuff happen. Record modeling comes up often as well. And this one sometimes is as easy as, well, here's the state of the model today. Here's the information as it comes in. All the construction model and so the design model, the construction model, and the 4D model comes together, gets connected to the facility manager, and gets output as a record model. Record model gets often mistaken. So as an architect, I'm very distinct to say, as an architect, I need to produce record information, but I'm not doing an LOD 500 model. I'm taking my design model and I'm updating it. Always my favorite example. The contractor moved my door a meter to the left, and then opened my model and moved my door a meter to the left. I'm not going to add concrete pours and rebar and stuff that I don't need for a design. The construction model and the 4D simulation model is going to have a whole host of information that as design I do not want to mix up. Those are three pieces that can come together as related, not merged into one big bucket of insanity, but three items that form as an entirety the record model for facilities or for operations. And as an asset manager, I can then say, well, you know what? I need something to fuse to an asset management system. The construction model has too much detail. I'll take maybe most of the design model, maybe some of the construction model, pick and choose. It's all at my disposal. It's all just information. I want to show you a bit of a different workflow, and this is from the UK. So all of these ones here are basically iterations that IBI chose to augment of the Penn State. In the UK, there are no process maps. So this is TTT, is Thames Tideway Tunnel. Basically a big tunnel that as proceeds to a hill, we were program managers to put a big tunnel underneath the river. Pretty cool. So what they've done is using the BS 1192 process, project information and asset information model. They started to make a workflow on how to get through the design process. Basically, they said they're going to define their EIR, the asset schema, and start to build the model. So remember, I went through this, and have a look at week 2 again. Most important piece is the EIR. Start to build the execution plan as part of the process. The assets would start to be designed and deployed. There would be a, what they call a design project information model, and then a data drop. So that's this D4. So you've gone through the developed design, technical design now. The assets are fully developed and modeled and ready to be deployed. And then they get built, and then an as constructed data drop. Everything is fused together, the design information plus the as built information ready for delivery. And this is, I always liked this slide because it really, for me, very simplistically just shows that path towards the asset information, the consolidated data turnover. And what I like about this is it's done outside of the confines or the initial impression of the big bucket of Revit. And I say that often because people who started BIM in the Revit world, here's your central model, here's your file, grow, add hundreds of people, share it everywhere, make that data bigger. Now your model's 500 meg, now it's a gigabyte. Okay, and now what? When I'm over here as an owner, Revit may mean nothing, but all that asset information is critical. And the UK defined it as graphical, non-graphical, and other. 3 pieces of information that kind of comes together. And during this portion of the life cycle, all of the Reviting and all the other BIM authoring tools don't really come into play. They're a backdrop. It's the enhancement of the data. And that's what we have to think about, especially going into our futures. You know, we really have to get to the point where creating models and having that foundation of data, that has to become second nature, because this data continuum from turnover or takeover straight through to the life cycle of the asset, the components itself, is where the future will be. And that's something that that is very, very important. Just a different perspective from the execution planning. From the contractor's end, they would develop an execution plan, coordinate again with the EIR, they would mobilize, they would start to build, develop their detailed design. So this is the contracting end. So remember, and this is in the design build world, designers are designing assets, contractors are designing as well. Sometimes there's conflicts in what's being designed, but a good example is I'm designing the wall as an architect or an engineer. They're designing formwork, excavation, formwork, maybe shoring. So they're going to dig the hole, design how to hold up their adjacent buildings. They're going to design how to form the wall, and their forming of the wall is going to be based on my design of the wall. And then it all comes together when these things get built. And once it's built, information continues on. And it's very interesting, especially that example, because I do come up with that a lot on design build. You know, my wall design changed. Well, wait a minute, we've already poured the footing. You can't change the wall because the footing's already in the ground. So now I'm stuck with the wall. Now and the ripple effect of what that has, it's amazing. And it all, like, you know, I said, the orchestration from the coordination of the BIM, for the BIM coordinator's perspective, coordinating this, making sure these workflows are defined, making sure people get it. Why is it important to understand that the contractor is making and delivering and building things that are dependent on what I'm designing at the same time? Get people to get it so that we can come together and actually, you know, understand this. concepts of assets. So even workflows around assets. I'll go just quickly on asset tags here. And I thought this was interesting where, oftentimes we lose sight of this. So if we know that we're delivering asset information at the end of the day, why not be at the forefront? Now, you, the BIM coordinator, you're not defining this, but my goodness, ask the questions, because this has inputs. The asset and the function of the asset, the classification system, goes right back to those first set of slides, right? If you know you have an owner that's interested, make sure it's facilitated at the front end so you're not messing with it down the road, okay? So the idea here is a unique identifier in your model could imply connectivity to other systems, the components, the classification systems that can then tie into items in the physical realm, a PIN number, a serial number, again tied to the asset class, that is then tied through the class to a product or a vendor. So I like this slide because it starts at the fundamental. You open up your Revit model, your EcoSim model, you place a component. You place it, you have an initial idea of potentially of a classification system, but at minimum an identification. And then beyond that, as it grows from somebody just thinking and modeling something through design, construction, installation, and the start of operation, it just grows. That data is glued and connected. We've designed connectivity of the life cycle of the data. And that designed connectivity, following an explicit workflow, empowers me as an owner now to do so much more. And it all comes from that base beginning. I'm going to skip over this. And that's kind of what I'm showing here. But it's, you place an item. So that's basically exactly here. You place an item, this wall or this component has an identifier. This is an omni-class classification. That identifier connects it to a piece of items, that connects it to an operational thing. That's the taxonomy. That's how the growth of these components occur right from that foundation. I think that's the best way to describe it. Just being cognizant of that fact, right? So as the BIM coordinator, what's your workflow? Your input at the very beginning could be, what's the classification? What's the naming system? Owner, do you care? Do you have an EIR that defines that certain components have to be named a certain way? Yes or no? If the answer is no, life is pretty easy. If the answer is yes, let's just make sure we're accommodating that. So with that, I know once again a lot of stuff. That's the last session of a lot of stuff. The thing I wanted to show in these diagrams. So, the week 12 assignment that I canceled was basically to grab one of these workflow diagrams and do something for fun. So like I showed at the beginning, the Penn State plan has all these process maps. That's a beautiful thing. As a BIM coordinator, they give them to you in PowerPoint, they give them to you in Visio, etc. So IBI, we grab the PowerPoint, and I'll just pop this open. We grabbed them, and graphically they look pretty, I don't know if horrid is the right word, but they don't look really nice. So we turned them into this, just graphically to make them better, whatever. That's what comes with Penn State, but more importantly, this comes with Penn State. And what this basically is saying is, in level 1, you have BIM uses and exchange of information. And very generally, they're saying, depending on where you are in design, planning, so you're going to validate your program, you're going to start authoring in schematic design, and you're potentially going to apply various uses, performing 4D model, etc., move into design development, continue those uses, move into construction documents approaching 90, 100%, continue those uses, move into construction, and then operation. So very generic. And what they're saying is based on where you are within the workflow, you will have inputs. So in order to validate your program, you need a program. In order to succeed in schematic design, you're going to deliver something from schematic design. So you're going to deliver a model for your disciplines. Then with each BIM use you implement, if you implement them, you'll have an output, and then et cetera, et cetera. Now, it's showing 5 as an example. If you're not doing a 4D model at schematic design, as a BIM coordinator, you remove that. If you're doing, let's say, asset management, let's say at schematic design, you want to feed some initial unique identifiers for valves into the owner's asset management system as a framework. You do it. You include that. The output would be list of valves, something like that. So that's what these process maps are essentially doing. And then on the next page, it starts the level. So that's level 1. Is basically saying the execution planning process as a whole. Then all these level 2 ones, similar to what I went through, these are the out of the box. This is how you go about these specific BIM uses. For existing conditions, they're showing you start the process. So every process map has a start and an end. Okay, so the week 12 assignment, which I canceled, just a reminder, we're not doing it, would have been create a process map based on, I can't remember what my criteria was. So for existing conditions, when you start the process, you collect your existing conditions. And in order to collect it, sometimes it could be a geotech report, historical data, GIS data, laser scan, whatever it is. And then you may need to survey existing conditions. So you may need a new survey, new laser survey, etc. And then you compile. And your compilation could be the creation of a scan to BIM. And then your output is an existing conditions model from which we can do something with. And you can see here we could have a laser scan model that comes out of a laser scan that gets incorporated in, etc. And why I'm showing you these again is to hopefully just to show, from a BIM coordinator perspective, it's really to lay down the framework of what and how. So for cost estimation, right? Start the process. What are we estimating? So, and again, notice it's the contractor. As an architect, we're only doing guess estimates. The contractor is going to lay out, these are exactly what we're needing and why. So notice this, the diagonal, the diamond is a decision. Is the model ready for QTO or quantity takeoff or cost analysis? And oftentimes, this is where the biggest dynamic between architects, engineers versus contractors. You give them a model, then you hear, oh, the design model is awesome. And you hear that, go right back to the legal stuff from 2 and 3 weeks ago. As an architect, I do not want to be liable for the contractor's cost estimates. But in the same breath, I want the contractor to be able to benefit from my model. So I got to make sure if I give him the model that he's comfortable with, that he's receiving something that was not designed for cost estimation. So what do I mean by that? Let's say I model all the concrete, but I don't delineate it the way that our contractor wants. So I've done a lot of design build projects where I've had to work with contractors. So I give them volume of concrete. I'll say, you've got 10,000 cubic yards, cubic meters, whatever, of concrete. And the contractor says, so I can't do nothing with that. I need to know how many walls versus slabs. And then I say, okay. And then they'll say, wait a minute. I need reinforced walls versus interior walls. And then I need external walls under hydrostatic pressure versus external walls that have dirt against versus external walls that are exposed. And I say, okay. But then they say, for the slabs, I need slabs that are slab on grade, slabs that are elevated, slabs that are elevator slabs, slabs that are containing water. And then you just shake your head and you say, you guys are nuts. So what was easy, Revit, model slab, call it concrete, hit a button, here's your quantity. All of a sudden it becomes something insane. So that's where contractors take it and do more. So from a contractor's perspective, they receive a BIM takeoff. So the BIM takeoff is your push button quantity. Here you go. Contractor, is it good? No. What do I got to do? Augment it. Where does it now come back and feed us? But notice, according to Penn State, all of the responsible party in this entire line is contractor. And the contractor's input is a 3D model. And that's the dynamic. They take the model, they like it or they don't. And then the legal aspect is, what do I got to do to make my model better versus it is what it is, move on with life. And that's a very unique dynamic. And I'll tell you, as BIM coordinators, I think that's where we get caught up the most, is in this info exchange not being up to snuff. And in a design bid world, it's easy. My work's done. Here's what you have. I could give you my PDFs of my drawings. I could give you my Revit model to work off of. Take it. In design build, there's a higher expectation because at the end of the day, we're all on the same team. Or even more complicated, oftentimes the contractor is my client as designer. So if I give them a 3D model that sucks from their perspective, they say, give me something better. What do I do? Right? Very complex, very fun. 4D modeling, similar, oops, sorry, I went too far there. Similar concept where input of a 3D model comes in, right? And then I like how they list here 4D modeler. That could be the contractor, that could be me. What it's saying is we've got information relative to how it's going to be constructed, so lead times on materials, etc. Construction sequencing that has to come from the contractor, and then we pull it all together and we view and we review, etc. That's what these workflows are. So I'm not going to keep going through these. I hope I've given the idea. These workflows, oftentimes people get very bogged down with them. But based on the Penn State BIM execution, there's a description of the BIM use. So programming, 4D modeling, whatever it is, describes the BIM use, and then these processes look at what we're going to do. Design review being one of the most common. We take in the design model at the start of the process, and then it's this compilation, right? Virtual mock-up is an interesting term that I don't like it, but it's basically, make your Navisworks. So in your workflow, if it's make a Navisworks model, that's your virtual design review model. But maybe you need a Navisworks, maybe you need a Solibri. Doesn't matter. As long as you know what you're doing and why you're doing it and away you go. And then notice here, an info exchange, design review information. So you're providing feedback back and you're facilitating that exchange. And then, is the design acceptable? Well, goodness, you're not answering that question, right? Based on the design review forum, somebody's going to decide, hey, there's an issue here. Usually it's the project manager feeding it back to the design professionals as here. Goes back, there's an issue, return to design authoring, you go back up to design authoring. I got to redo my design. I got to do something, right? As a BIM coordinator, you may be asked, you know what, take a version. Take a static snapshot of my model because I'm about to make a major change. I think it's going to come back, whatever, it might not be accepted. So you may be involved in model authoring, archiving, you may be involved in creating different versions, etc. But again, you're not the designer. You're not involved in design work, design decision making, etc. So I think with that, that's pretty much everything I wanted to cover today. Questions, comments? Anybody? Is anybody awake still?
Yes, we are.
Woohoo!
Yes.
There we go. Any questions or comments? Okay, well, digesting is good. Whatever comes up, as I said, so next week will be a very light class. Actually, well, this is it. There's no more quote teaching, if you will. So what I ask, and I see all seven of you are on now, which is great. Sorry, 6 of you. Next week, hopefully by then, if you have the opportunity to listen, to listen to week 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. I don't know. I don't know again how all the other 4 classes are going through their recovery plans from the work stoppage. But we'll use the class to have any dialogue about the previous week. So anything from week 1 to 12, we'll go through. We can discuss anything. Make it more of an open forum. If there's any questions on. So that'll be the day after. I guess that's the one question. Are we all okay to have the week 8 assignment close on the 30th? Or do you want me to maybe have it closed at the end of December 1st? So if there's any last questions about with the week 8 assignment, maybe we can address them as well next week. Would that be cool?
I think by December 1st would be awesome.
Okay. So I'll do that right now. Just because if I don't do it right now, of course I'll forget. So by then, yeah. So by next week, and that's why, because the whole recovery, I just want to make sure we're all, we can move forward. And because it's virtual, it's all at your own pace. But if we don't do it, then it'll just linger. So if I set the assignment to December 1st, so midnight, 11:59. So with that due date, if you guys could read everything, so if you all could see those previous and hit those 2 quizzes, because as I said, they're 10-question quizzes. So, have a listen to week 7, 8, and 9, and then just immediately do the quiz. Like that's the only way I can tell you. Just hear it, do the quiz. The quiz is right out of the stuff I'm saying. I promise you that. It literally is. So get those knocked off quickly, and then any interaction or dialogue on the week 8 assignments. It's very similar to the week 5 one, but just focusing on one solution. And I do discuss it heavily in the recordings. But ask any questions, and then we could talk through any lingering items next week. And I'd hope to also next week start to talk about the final group assignment as well. So, and I think that's how we'll use any. If it's only an hour, it's only an hour. But it's all good. But we'll go through that, and then we'll talk through when to set the last class. If we want to wait a couple weeks and set it on the 22nd instead of the 14th, we can do that. I'm completely flexible. I don't want to push to you guys. I don't want to push to the last Friday though. So we'll kind of use next week as a look back, a recap, any questions, and a look forward to final completion. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Yep.
So if there aren't any closing thoughts, have fun at the next class. Welcome back, and have a good weekend, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. You too.
Take it easy, guys.